Lightning flashed across the rain-soaked windows of Oakridge Central Precinct as the front doors burst open. 10-year-old Ethan Miller stumbled in, soaked to the bone, carrying his 6-year-old sister Lily in his arms. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, and a makeshift bandage fashioned from a torn t-shirt was wrapped around her arm, stained with blood that hadn't yet been washed away by the downpour. "Please," Ethan gasped, his small body trembling under his sister's weight. "Something's wrong with Lily. She needs help. She needs help right now." The officers at the front desk froze for one heartbeat, then two, before Sergeant James Wilson dropped his coffee mug and rushed forward, catching both children just as Ethan's legs gave out. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Pinecrest Apartments sat on the east side of Oakridge, where the morning sun hit the peeling paint first, giving the aging complex a golden glow that briefly disguised its decline. Apartment 3B housed the Miller family, 10-year-old Ethan, 6-year-old Lily, and their mother Sarah, who worked double shifts at the Blue Valley Diner and night reception at the Oakridge Inn just to keep the lights on. In the soft light of a September morning, Ethan Miller stood at the bathroom mirror, carefully counting out his sister's vitamins. One purple, one white, one small translucent capsule that was supposed to help with her special blood, as their mother called it. Lily had been born with a rare blood disorder that made her bruise easily and heal slowly. The doctors had long names for it that Ethan had memorized but couldn't pronounce. "Lily, medicine time," he called, arranging the pills next to a glass of apple juice, watered down to make it last longer. "Remember to take the big one last." From the small bedroom they shared came the shuffling of small feet, followed by Lily's appearance in the bathroom doorway. Her dark brown hair hung in messy waves around a face still soft with sleep, her favorite faded unicorn pajamas at least 2 sizes too small. "Is Mom home yet?" she asked, rubbing her eyes with small fists. Ethan shook his head. "Night shift at the inn, remember? She'll be back after we leave for school." He didn't mention that their mother had looked exhausted when she'd left for her second job, or that he'd heard her crying in the bathroom the night before, phone pressed to her ear as she begged someone, the insurance company, he guessed, for more time. Lily took her pills one by one, making a face at the taste but not complaining. She'd been taking them for as long as she could remember. "Does your arm still hurt?" Ethan asked, noticing how she held her left arm slightly away from her body. 3 days ago, she'd fallen at the playground, a normal tumble for most kids. But for Lily, it had resulted in a deep bruise that had spread across her forearm like spilled ink. "Just a little," she lied, her brave smile not quite reaching her eyes. Ethan nodded, pretending to believe her. "Breakfast," he announced, leading her to the kitchen. The apartment was small but neat, everything in its place, a skill Ethan had perfected out of necessity. Their mother had taught him to be organized, to plan ahead, to be prepared for emergencies. When you have less, you have to manage more. "Carefully," she always said. The kitchen cabinets yielded the last of the cereal and just enough milk. Ethan poured a full bowl for Lily and a smaller one for himself, mentally calculating how long they'd need to make the groceries last. 3 more days until payday. They could manage. As they ate, Ethan went through his mental morning checklist, lunch packed for both of them. Permission slip for Lily's field trip signed with the careful forgery of his mother's signature, a skill he'd developed not out of mischief, but necessity. Homework completed, front door double locked when they left. Through the thin walls of their apartment, they could hear Mrs. Jenkins next door, shuffling around, the steady thump of her walker hitting the same spots every morning. Ethan had started keeping track of those thumps, listening for them, knowing that if they stopped, something might be wrong. Another responsibility he'd taken on without being asked. "Will you play Knights and Dragons with me after school?" Lily asked, pushing her empty bowl away. "Sure," Ethan smiled, collecting both dishes to wash, "but homework first." "You always say that," Lily sighed dramatically, but there was no real complaint in her voice. Like Ethan, she had adapted to their circumstances, understanding without being told that some things just had to be a certain way. As they got ready for school, Ethan noticed Lily wince as she pulled her sweater over her head. The bruise on her arm had darkened overnight, spreading toward her elbow. A knot of worry tightened in his stomach, but he pushed it aside. The pills would help. They always had before. The walk to Oakridge Elementary took exactly 12 minutes if they didn't. Stop. Another calculation Ethan had memorized. The school was only 8 blocks away, past the corner store where the owner, Mr. Guzman, sometimes slipped them day-old pastries, and the park where they weren't allowed to play unless their mum was with them. The autumn air carried a hint of wood smoke and the earthy scent of fallen leaves, red and gold, now carpeting the sidewalks. "Race you to the corner," Lily suggested, already stepping forward, but Ethan caught her hand. "Not today, Sprout. Your arm, remember?" She pouted but didn't argue, another small sign that the pain was worse than she admitted. Ethan adjusted his backpack, heavy with both his books and half of Lily's, and they continued their walk at a steady pace. At the school gates, Ethan performed his usual scan of the playground, identifying potential issues before they arose. The 5th grade boys who sometimes teased Lily about her bruises, the areas where rougher play might lead to accidental bumps or falls. He'd developed a kind of 6th sense for danger, for the small details adults often missed. "I'll meet you at the red bench after school, okay?" he told Lily, kneeling to retie her shoelace. "Don't wait inside. I don't want you walking through the big kids' hallway." Lily nodded, solemn as a soldier receiving orders. "Red bench, I remember." As she skipped toward the 1st grade entrance, Ethan watched until she disappeared inside, cataloging the slight hitch in her step, the careful way she held her left arm close to her body. Only then did he turn toward his own classroom, his mind already jumping ahead to dismissal time, to dinner preparations, to checking if any new bills had arrived in the mail. In his pocket, he carried 3 things: the key to their apartment, a folded $5 bill for emergencies, and his mother's worn business card from the diner with the phone number circled in red. For real emergencies. He touched each item in turn, a ritual that settled his nerves before heading to class. Mr. Reynolds looked up as Ethan entered the classroom, a flash of concern crossing his face. "Ethan, could I speak with you for a moment?" Ethan approached the desk, mentally reviewing any assignments he might have missed, any rules he might have broken. Nothing came to mind. "How are things at home?" Mr. Reynolds asked quietly, ensuring the other arriving students couldn't hear. "Your mother didn't make it to the parent-teacher conferences last week." "She had to work," Ethan replied, the explanation automatic by now. "She works 2 jobs." Mr. Reynolds nodded, his expression soft with an understanding that made Ethan uncomfortable. He didn't want pity. "And how's your sister doing? I saw her in the hallway yesterday. She seemed a bit under the weather." "She's fine," Ethan said, perhaps too quickly. "Just tired. She stays up reading sometimes." The half-truth sat heavy on his tongue. But Ethan had learned early that too much honesty about their situation often led to uncomfortable questions, to phone calls home that only added to his mother's stress, to whispers about services and assistance that his mother feared more than bill collectors. Mr. Reynolds seemed to weigh Ethan's response before nodding again. "If you ever need to talk, my door is always open, not just about school stuff." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ethan forced a smile. "Thank you, sir." As he took his seat, Ethan felt the weight of his teacher's gaze. Mr. Reynolds meant well, most adults did, but they rarely understood the complex calculations that governed Ethan's life. The careful balance between asking for help and avoiding unwanted attention, between managing their problems and keeping their family together. The morning passed in a blur of math problems and history facts. Ethan was a good student, not because he was naturally gifted, but because he couldn't afford not to be. His mother had made it clear that education was their way forward, their escape route from paycheck to paycheck living. So he studied hard, stayed focused, kept his head down. At lunch, he sat with his friend Max, trading half his sandwich for Max's apple. Fruit was expensive, and Lily needed the vitamins. They talked about normal 10-year-old things, the new superhero movie, the upcoming science fair, Max's new bike. Ethan contributed enough to the conversation to seem engaged, but part of his mind remained elsewhere, running through the afternoon's logistics. When the bell rang for the end of the day, Ethan was the first out of his seat, weaving through crowded hallways with practiced efficiency. The red bench came into view, but Lily wasn't there. He scanned the playground, the dismissal lines, the school entrance. No sign of her. A flutter of panic rose in his chest. He forced it down, approaching Lily's classroom with measured steps. Through the window, he could see her still sitting at her desk, head bent low, her teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, kneeling beside her. Ethan pushed the door open. "Lily, it's time to go." Both Lily and Mrs. Abernathy looked up. Ethan immediately registered his sister's flushed cheeks, the glassy brightness of her eyes. "Ethan," Mrs. Abernathy said, rising to her feet, "I was just about to call your mother. Lily's not feeling well. She's running a fever." "Mum's at work," Ethan said automatically. "I can take her home." Mrs. Abernathy frowned. "I really think a parent should come get her. We tried the emergency contact number, but there was no answer." Ethan's mind raced. The emergency contact was there. Neighbor Mrs. Jenkins, who was probably at her weekly doctor's appointment. His mother couldn't leave work. The last time she'd left early, she'd nearly lost her job at the diner. "Our apartment is just 8 blocks away," Ethan said, his voice more confident than he felt. "I walk her home every day. I'll make sure." She rests and takes her medicine. Mrs. Abernathy hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and practicality. "Ethan, Lily mentioned her arm is hurting quite badly, and that bruise looks concerning." "She has a blood condition," Ethan explained, the words well rehearsed. "She bruises easily. The doctor knows about it. She has special medicine." This wasn't entirely untrue, but it wasn't the complete truth either. The doctor did know about Lily's condition, but they hadn't been able to see him in months. The special medicine was a prescription that had run out 2 weeks ago, which they couldn't refill because the insurance had lapsed. Their mother had been giving Lily over-the-counter supplements instead, promising they'd see the doctor as soon as the new insurance paperwork went through. Mrs. Abernathy studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, but I'm going to call later to check on her, and I really need to speak with your mother tomorrow." "I'll tell her," Ethan promised, holding out his hand to Lily. "Come on, Sprout. Let's get you home." Lily slid off her chair, moving with the careful slowness of someone trying not to jostle an injury. As she reached for her backpack, she swayed slightly, and Ethan was at her side in an instant, steadying her. "I've got it," he said, slinging her backpack over his shoulder alongside his own. "Just focus on walking, okay?" Mrs. Abernathy watched, them with concerned eyes as they left the classroom, but Ethan pretended not to notice. He'd gotten very good at pretending not to notice adults' concern. Outside, the bright afternoon of earlier had vanished, replaced by heavy gray clouds gathering on the horizon. The air felt dense with approaching rain. Ethan calculated the distance, home against the speed of the brewing storm, and Lily's condition. It would be close. How bad is it really? he asked once they were away from the school, no longer needing to maintain the brave front. Lily's lower lip trembled. "It hurts a lot, Ethan, and it feels hot, and I'm cold everywhere else." Ethan pressed a palm to her forehead, the way he'd seen their mother do countless times. Lily's skin burned against his hand. Definitely a fever, and higher than the low-grade ones she sometimes got with her condition. "We'll get you home, and you can rest," he assured her. "I'll make soup from the canned chicken, and you can have the last of the orange juice." Lily nodded, but her usual enthusiasm for his cooking was absent. Another warning sign. They had made it halfway home when the first fat raindrops began to fall. By the time they reached their street, it was pouring, the kind of sudden autumn downpour that drenched you in seconds. Ethan pulled off his jacket and held it over Lily, urging her to move faster despite her dragging steps. The stairs to their third-floor apartment had never seemed so endless. By the time they reached their door, Lily was leaning heavily against him, her breath coming in short gasps. Ethan fumbled with the key, supporting her weight while trying to unlock the door. Inside, he helped her straight to the bathroom, peeling off her wet clothes and wrapping her in the fluffiest towel they owned. A Christmas gift from 3 years ago, now thin from countless washes. She was shivering despite the fever, her teeth chattering as he helped her into dry pajamas. "I want Mom," she whispered as he tucked her into bed. "She'll be home in a few hours," Ethan promised, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "Try to sleep a little." But sleep didn't come. Instead, Lily's condition worsened by the hour. Her fever climbed, and the bruise on her arm had taken on an angry red outline, hot to the touch. When she began to drift in and out of consciousness, mumbling incoherently, real fear gripped Ethan's heart. He tried calling the diner, but the number went straight to voicemail. The power was out in parts of town due to the storm. He tried Mrs. Jenkins next door, but there was no answer. The emergency $5 bill in his pocket suddenly seemed woefully inadequate for the situation at hand. Rain lashed against the windows as Ethan paced their small apartment, Lily's whimpers punctuating the sound of the storm. He had been taught to be self-reliant, to handle problems, to wait for their mother. But this was beyond his capabilities. As Lily's fevered muttering turned to frightened cries of pain, Ethan made his decision. He couldn't wait for their mother. He couldn't wait for the storm to pass. He needed to get Lily help now. The Oakridge Central Precinct was 20 blocks away, much farther than the school, in the opposite direction from the diner where his mother worked. In good weather, it would take at least 30 minutes to walk there. In this storm, carrying Lily. Ethan didn't know, but he had to try. He wrapped Lily in their warmest blanket, then covered her with a plastic garbage bag as added protection against the rain. She was barely conscious now, her skin hot and dry despite the dampness all around them. "I'm going to get you help, Lily," he whispered, lifting her into his arms. She was small for her age. Too small, the doctor had said at their last visit. But still heavy for Ethan's 10-year-old frame. "Just hold on, okay? Just hold on." The storm had intensified, turning the streets into rushing streams. The wind drove the rain sideways, making it impossible to stay dry even under the shelter of shop awnings and overhangs. Ethan's arms burned with the effort of carrying his sister, but he pushed forward, one step after another, counting blocks in his head to distract from the pain. 8 blocks in, his foot slipped on the slick pavement, nearly sending them both crashing to the ground. He recovered just in time, heart pounding, arms tightening around Lily's limp form. She hadn't even reacted to the near fall, a realization that spurred him to move faster despite his exhaustion. 12 blocks. 15. The rain obscured his vision, plastering his hair to his forehead and running into his eyes. Cars passed occasionally, their headlights cutting through the gloom, but none stopped. In his mind, Ethan had become invisible, just another part of the storm, unseen and unheard. By the time the precinct's lights came into view, Ethan's legs were numb, his arms locked in position around Lily. Her breathing had become shallow, her skin alternating between burning hot and alarmingly cool. The 20 blocks had felt like 20 miles. With his last reserves of strength, Ethan climbed the steps to the police station and pushed through the heavy doors into the bright fluorescent light of the lobby. "Please," he gasped, his voice breaking. "Something's wrong with Lily. She needs help. She needs help right now." And then Sergeant James Wilson was there, catching them both as Ethan's legs finally gave out. "Get an ambulance!" Wilson shouted to the desk officer, lowering the children gently to the floor. "And find some blankets!" Ethan wouldn't let go of Lily, even as officers swarmed around them, even as someone wrapped a dry blanket around his shoulders, even as Sergeant Wilson knelt beside them, his voice steady and calm. "You're safe now, son," the officer said, placing a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Help is coming. Can you tell me what happened to your sister?" Through chattering teeth, Ethan tried to explain about Lily's condition, about the fall at the playground, about the bruise that wouldn't heal, about the fever that kept rising. The words tumbled out in a rush, punctuated by shivers that racked his small frame. "Where are your parents?" Wilson asked, his tone careful, non-judgmental. "Just Mom," Ethan managed. "She works at the diner, then the inn. Double shifts. The power's out at the diner. I couldn't reach her." Wilson nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "And you carried your sister all the way here? In this storm?" Ethan nodded weakly. 20 blocks, I counted." Something passed across the sergeant's face. Respect, perhaps, or amazement. "That was very brave, Ethan. Very brave indeed." The wail of an approaching siren cut through the patter of rain on the roof. Moments later, paramedics burst through the doors, equipment in hand. Ethan was gently but firmly moved aside as they attended to Lily, checking vital signs, starting an IV, lifting her onto a stretcher. "BP's dropping," one paramedic said to another. "We need to move." "I'm going with her," Ethan insisted, trying to stand on legs that no longer seemed to belong to him. "Of course you are," Sergeant Wilson said, helping him up. "I'll take you both to the hospital myself. We'll find your mother on the way." As they moved toward the exit, an officer approached with a steaming cup. "Hot chocolate," she said, pressing it into Ethan's hands. "You look like you could use it." The simple kindness, so unexpected after the ordeal of the past hours, nearly undid him. Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them back. Lily needed him to be strong. He couldn't fall apart now. In Sergeant Wilson's police cruiser, following. Close behind the ambulance, Ethan finally allowed himself to release the breath he felt he'd been holding for hours. The rain continued to pour, but they were moving through it now, lights flashing, siren clearing a path through the storm-emptied streets. "You did the right thing, Ethan," Wilson said, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Coming to us. You might just have saved your sister's life." Ethan stared out at the rain-slicked streets, at the blurred lights of the city passing by. "I didn't know what else to do," he admitted. "I'm supposed to take care of her until Mom gets home. I'm supposed to handle things. Some things are too big for anyone to handle alone," Wilson replied softly. "Even adults." As they pulled up to the emergency entrance of Mercy General Hospital, Ethan watched the paramedics rushing Lily's stretcher inside. His sister looked so small, so vulnerable under the harsh lights and efficient hands of strangers. The fear he'd been suppressing rose up again, threatening to overwhelm him. "Will she be okay?" he asked, his voice small in the confines of the police car. Sergeant Wilson turned to face him fully, his expression serious but kind. "The doctors here are very good, Ethan. Your sister is getting the best care possible now." The emergency room of Mercy General was a maze of curtained sections and beeping machines. Ethan stayed close to Sergeant Wilson as they followed Lily's stretcher through sliding doors marked "Authorized personnel only." Normally, such barriers would have stopped them, but Wilson flashed his badge, and the staff seemed to understand instinctively that separating the siblings was not an option. Dr. Olivia Martinez took charge of Lily's care, her movements precise and efficient as she examined the little girl. "How long has the arm been like this?" she asked, gently probing the angry red skin around the bruise. "It started 3 days ago," Ethan said, watching anxiously from the foot of the bed. "She fell at the playground, but it kept getting worse. And then today, she started feeling really hot." Dr. Martinez nodded, making notes on her tablet. "And your sister has a blood disorder, correct? Do you know which one?" Ethan recited the long medical term his mother had made him memorize for emergencies. The doctor looked up, surprised. "That's exactly right," she said. "Is your sister currently on any medication for this condition?" "Here." Ethan hesitated. The truth could get their mother in trouble, could trigger investigations, could separate them, but lying might hurt Lily's treatment. "She was," he said carefully, "but her prescription ran out 2 weeks ago. Mum's been giving her vitamins instead." "The insurance." He trailed off, not knowing how to explain the complex financial situation that had led to their current predicament. Dr. Martinez's face remained professionally neutral, but her eyes softened. "I understand," she said simply. "We'll get her started on the proper medication right away." Blood was drawn, IVs were inserted, antibiotics were administered. Ethan watched it all, staying out of the way but refusing to leave Lily's side. At some point, a nurse brought him a sandwich and another hot chocolate. He hadn't realized how hungry he was until the food was in front of him. "Your mother is on her way," Sergeant Wilson told him, returning from a phone call. The diner manager drove to the inn to find her when they couldn't reach her by phone. "She should be here soon." Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. Soon, the weight of responsibility would shift back to adult shoulders. Soon, he could just be a brother again, not a caretaker. "Ethan." Lily's voice, weak but clear, drew his attention immediately. Her eyes were open, clearer than they had been. "For hours." "Hey, Sprout," he said, moving to her side. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she whispered, "not so hot now." She looked around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. "Are we at the doctor's?" "We're at the hospital," Ethan explained. "Your arm got really infected from that fall, but the doctors are giving you medicine to make it better." Lily processed this information slowly. "Did Mom bring us?" Ethan shook his head. "Mom's still at work, but she's coming. I brought you." "How?" Lily asked, her forehead wrinkling in confusion. Before Ethan could answer, the curtain was pulled back, and Sarah Miller rushed in, still wearing her diner uniform, her face pale with fear and worry. "Lily! Ethan!" she cried, gathering them both in her arms. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry! I'm so sorry!" Tears streamed down her face as she pulled back to examine Lily, to check Ethan for injuries, to reassure herself that both her children were alive and safe. Dr. Martinez stepped forward, introducing herself and leading Sarah a few steps away, to explain Lily's condition. Ethan could still hear their conversation, words like cellulitis and septicemia and immediate intervention. He understood enough to know how close they had come to real disaster. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought it was just a bruise. I thought the vitamins would be enough until the new insurance." Her voice broke. "Mrs. Miller," Dr. Martinez said gently, "your son's quick action prevented this from becoming much worse. Lily will need to stay in the hospital for a few days for IV antibiotics, and will need to restart her regular medication for her blood disorder, but she's going to be fine." Sarah nodded, wiping away tears. "The insurance, I can't, we have programs for that," Dr. Martinez assured her. The financial office will work with you. Right now, just focus on your daughter. As Sarah returned to Lily's bedside, Sergeant Wilson motioned for Ethan to step outside the curtained area with him. "You did something extraordinary today," Wilson told him, kneeling down to Ethan's level. "Not many adults would have had the courage to do what you did." Ethan looked down at his still damp sneakers. "I was scared," he admitted. "Really scared. I didn't know if I could make it all the way to the police station." "That's what real courage is," Wilson said. "Being scared, but doing what needs to be done anyway." A social worker named Diane Carter joined them, introducing herself with a warm smile. "I'd like to talk to you and your mom about some resources that might help your family," she explained to Ethan. "There are programs that can assist with medical expenses, with child care, with making sure Lily's medication doesn't run out again." Ethan tensed, immediately suspicious. "We don't need foster care," he said quickly. "Mom takes good care of us. She works really hard." "I can see that," Diane assured him. "That's not what I'm suggesting at all. The programs I'm talking about are designed to help families stay together, not separate them." Ethan studied her face for any sign of deception, but found only genuine concern. Slowly, he nodded. "Okay, but I want to stay with Lily tonight." "I think that can be arranged," Diane said, glancing at Dr. Martinez, who nodded in agreement. Later that evening, after forms had been filled out, statements had been taken, and Sarah had been persuaded to go home for a few hours to shower and pack overnight bags for both children. Ethan sat in a chair beside Lily's hospital bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. She was sleeping peacefully now, the antibiotics already working to bring down her fever. The bruise on her arm had been properly dressed, and the pain medication kept her comfortable. Sergeant Wilson had gone back to the precinct, but not before, promising to check on them the next day. Dr. Martinez had finished her shift, handing Lily's care over to the night doctor with detailed instructions. Diane had left a folder full of information about assistance programs with Sarah, along with her direct phone number. For the first time in hours, perhaps for the first time in years, Ethan felt the tight knot of responsibility in his chest begin to loosen. Adults were handling things now, competent, caring adults who seemed to genuinely want to help. A nurse appeared with a reclining chair that could be converted into a small bed. "Thought you might want to get some sleep," she said, setting it up next to Lily's bed. "I brought you a pillow and blanket too." "Thank you," Ethan said, the words inadequate for the kindness he'd been shown today. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," the nurse replied, pausing in her arrangement of the bedding. "Will Lily really be okay?" he asked, his voice dropping to a whisper so as not to wake his sister. "I mean, really okay?" The nurse's expression was gentle but honest. "Your sister has a serious condition that will need careful management, both the blood disorder and this infection. But yes, she's going to recover from this episode. And it sounds like there will be better systems in place to help your family manage her health going forward." Ethan nodded, absorbing this information. "I should have brought her in sooner," he said, the admission heavy with guilt. "I knew something was wrong." "You're 10 years old," the nurse reminded him. "And from what I hear, you carried your sister 20 blocks through a rainstorm to get her help. That's not something many children, or even adults, would have the courage to do." As the nurse left, Ethan settled into the recliner, pulling the blanket up to his chin. The hospital sounds, beeping monitors, squeaking shoes on linoleum, distant conversations, created a strange sort of lullaby. His body ached from the ordeal, but his mind was finally beginning to quiet. Just as he was drifting off to sleep, he felt a small hand reach out from the hospital bed, searching for his. Ethan took Lily's hand in his own, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You carried me through the rain," Lily murmured, her voice thick with sleep and medication, "all the way to the police station." "I did," Ethan confirmed, surprised that she remembered or had pieced it together. Like a superhero, she said, her eyes still closed. My superhero brother. Ethan swallowed the lump that formed in his throat. Go back to sleep, Sprout, he whispered. I'll be right here. As Lily's breathing deepened again, Ethan stared up at the ceiling tiles, thinking about the day's events. He didn't feel like a superhero. He'd just done what needed to be done, what anyone would have done for someone they loved. But maybe that was the point. Maybe heroism wasn't about capes or special powers. Maybe it was just about love. Love strong enough to carry someone 20 blocks through a storm. Love stubborn enough to refuse to give up. Love brave enough to ask for help when it was needed most. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside, the hospital room, for the first time in a long time, Ethan Miller slept without worry, without the weight of adult responsibilities pressing down on his young shoulders. Just a brother holding his sister's hand, both of them safe in the knowledge that they were not alone anymore. The morning brought watery sunlight through the hospital windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air above Lily's bed. Ethan woke to the sound of quiet conversation, his mother and Dr. Martinez reviewing Lily's progress overnight. The infection is responding well to the antibiotics, Dr. Martinez was saying, her voice low so as not to disturb the children. Her blood work is still concerning, but that's to be expected given how long she's been without proper medication for her condition. Sarah nodded, dark circles under her eyes, testifying to a night spent in an uncomfortable chair rather than sleeping. When can we restart her regular medication? We already have, Dr. Martinez assured her, and Ms. Carter from Social Services has enrolled Lily in the Children's Medical Assistance Program. It will cover the cost of her medications, regardless of your insurance status. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. I tried so hard to keep up with everything, she whispered. The insurance paperwork, the prescriptions, the doctor's appointments. But after Mark left with both jobs, She trailed off, shaking her head. Mrs. Miller, Dr. Martinez said gently, you're doing the best you can in a difficult situation. No one is judging you for that. We just want to make sure you have the support you need going forward. Ethan closed his eyes, pretending to still be asleep. He'd heard his mother cry too many times over the past year, had watched her struggle with bills and paperwork late into the night after double shifts. He'd taken on as much as he could, caring for Lily, managing the household, hiding his own needs and worries, but it had never felt like enough. Mom? Lily's voice, stronger than it had been the night before, interrupted his thoughts. Are you crying? Sarah moved swiftly to her daughter's side, brushing hair from her forehead. Just happy tears, baby. Happy that you're feeling better. Lily smiled, her eyes clearer, her cheeks less flushed. The medicine tastes yucky, but it's making my arm not hurt so much. That's good, sweetheart. That's very good. Sarah leaned down to kiss Lily's forehead, then turned to Ethan. And how's my brave boy this morning? Ethan sat up, stretching, muscles that still ached from yesterday's journey. I'm okay, he said, then amended, I'm good, actually. The weight that had pressed on him for so long had lightened, not disappeared entirely, but enough that he could breathe more easily. Dr. Martinez checked Lily's vitals one more time, made notes in her chart, and promised to return later in the day. The nurses will bring breakfast soon, she told them. And Lily, I want you to try to eat as much as you can. You need strength to fight this infection. After she left, a knock at the door announced Sergeant Wilson's arrival. He was off duty, dressed in jeans and a sweater instead of his uniform, but he carried himself with the same quiet authority. Thought I'd check in on my favorite heroes this morning, he said, setting a small gift bag on Lily's bedside table. Brought something for you. Lily's eyes lit up. A present? For me? Wilson nodded, smiling. Go ahead, open it. Inside the bag was a small stuffed Dalmatian wearing a police badge. "This is Rex," Wilson explained. "He's our station mascot. We give him to very brave people who help us do our job, and you and your brother definitely qualify." Lily hugged the stuffed dog to her chest, beaming. "Thank you, Officer Wilson." "There's something in there for your brother too," Wilson said, nodding toward the bag. Ethan reached in and pulled out a junior police badge. Not a toy, but a real honorary badge mounted on a leather holder. "For extraordinary courage in the face of adversity," read the inscription below the shield. "I don't know what to say," Ethan murmured, running his fingers over the metal emblem. "You don't have to say anything," Wilson assured him. "Just know that what you did yesterday made a difference, not just for Lily, but for a lot of people." Sarah looked confused. "What do you mean?" Wilson leaned against the windowsill, crossing his arms. "Ethan's actions highlighted some gaps in our community safety net. After talking with Diane Carter and Dr. Martinez last night, we're working on a new program, a sort of community alert system for families who might need extra support during emergencies, especially when parents are working multiple jobs." "Like us," Lily said, still clutching her new stuffed companion. "Like you," Wilson agreed. "The idea is to create a network of safe adults, teachers, neighbors, emergency services personnel who can be contacted quickly if a child needs help and can't reach their parents. We're calling it the Bridge Program because it creates connections where there were gaps before." Sarah looked thoughtful. "That could have made all the difference yesterday. If Ethan had been able to reach someone right away when Lily's fever spiked." "Exactly," Wilson said. "And we're also partnering with the hospital to create an emergency medical information system. Parents can register their children's medical conditions and current medications, so if they ever need emergency treatment, doctors have immediate access to that information, even if the parents can't be reached." "All because of what Ethan did?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with emotion. Wilson nodded. "Your son showed us where the system was failing. Now it's our job to fix it." Ethan felt his cheeks warming at the praise. "I just did what I had to do," he said, echoing his words from the night before. "Sometimes that's all it takes to change things," Wilson replied. "One person doing what needs to be done, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of breakfast trays. Lily's face lit up at the sight of pancakes with syrup, a rare treat in their household, where breakfast was usually cereal or toast. Ethan realized how hungry he was, his body still recovering from yesterday's exertion. As they ate, Wilson chatted with them about lighter topics, the upcoming fall festival in town, the police department's annual community picnic, Lily's favorite school subjects. It felt normal, almost ordinary, as if they were just a family enjoying breakfast together, not recovering from a near tragedy. When Wilson eventually left, promising to return the next day, Sarah turned to Ethan with an expression he'd never seen before, a mixture of pride, amazement, and something like reverence. 20 blocks, she said quietly, in that storm, carrying. "Your sister?" Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with the focused attention. "I couldn't think of what else to do. The power was out at the diner, and Mrs. Jenkins wasn't home, and Lily kept getting worse." "Most kids would have panicked," Sarah said, "or waited, hoping things would get better. I was worried that—" Ethan hesitated, not wanting to frighten Lily, who was contentedly arranging her new stuffed dog on her pillow. "I was worried it wouldn't get better, and I promised to take care of her." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. "Oh, Ethan, it was never supposed to be your job to take care of everything. I'm the parent. I should have—" "You were working," Ethan interrupted. "You were doing your job, taking care of us the way you know how. I was just doing mine." Sarah reached across Lily's bed, taking Ethan's hand in hers. "Things are going to be different now," she promised. "Miss Carter is helping me apply for a better assistance program, one that will let me cut back to just one job. And Dr. Martinez has referred us to a specialist for Lily who works with low-income families. And we have Rex now," Lily added, patting the stuffed dog's head. "He'll protect us too." Ethan smiled at his sister's innocent logic. "That's right, Sprout. We've got Rex on our team now." The rest of the day passed in a parade of hospital routines, medication rounds, doctor check-ins, visits from social workers and hospital administrators. Ethan noticed how people looked at him differently, now with a kind of respectful awe that made him both proud and embarrassed. Word of what he'd done had spread through the hospital. Nurses stopped by to meet the boy who carried his sister through the storm. Other patients peeked in curiously. Even the hospital chaplain came by to tell Ethan that his actions were a testament to the power of love and courage. By evening, Lily was visibly stronger, sitting up in bed and coloring in a book that one of the nurses had brought her. The angry red streaks on her arm had begun to fade, and her fever was completely gone. Dr. Martinez confirmed that she would need to stay one more night for observation, but could likely go home the following day. As darkness fell outside the hospital windows, Ethan sat on the edge of Lily's bed, helping her color a picture of a rainbow-maned unicorn. Sarah had gone to the cafeteria to bring back dinner, leaving them alone for a few minutes. "Ethan?" Lily asked, carefully staying within the lines as she applied purple to the unicorn's tail. "Yeah, Sprout. Did you really carry me all the way to the police station, in the rain?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I did." Lily considered this, her small forehead wrinkling in concentration. "Were you scared?" "A little," Ethan admitted, "but I was more scared of what would happen if I didn't get you help." "I was scared too," Lily confessed. "I remember bits and pieces. I remember how hard it was raining and how you kept telling me stories to keep me awake. You told me about the knight who fought the dragon to save the princess." "You remember that?" Ethan was surprised. He'd thought Lily had been unconscious for most of the journey. Lily nodded. "I wasn't the princess in the story, though. I was the knight's sister, and we were both going to fight the dragon together once I got stronger." Ethan smiled, touched that she remembered. "That's right, because knights are always braver when they're not fighting alone. And when we get home, we can play knights and dragons again," Lily said, returning to her coloring. "Only this time, you can be the one who needs rescuing, and I'll save you." "Deal," Ethan agreed, reaching out to ruffle her hair. "But homework first." Lily giggled, the sound like music after the fear and uncertainty of the past 24 hours. "You always say that." As Sarah returned with dinner trays, Ethan felt a sense of rightness settle over him. There would still be challenges ahead, bills to pay, medications to manage, a system to navigate. But they wouldn't be facing those challenges alone anymore. Sometimes courage meant carrying someone you loved through a storm, and sometimes it meant letting others help carry you when you needed it most. The journey wasn't over, but the path ahead seemed clearer now, illuminated by the connections they'd made and the bridge they'd begun to build between their small family and the wider community. For now, though, Ethan was content to simply be a brother again, coloring unicorns with his sister, accepting the helping hands that had finally reached out to them. The 20 blocks that had seemed so impossible yesterday had led them exactly where they needed to be. 1 week after the storm, Ethan sat in a chair outside Diane Carter's office at the Oakridge Family Services Center, swinging his legs nervously as he waited. The building was different from what he'd expected, bright and welcoming, with colorful murals and comfortable furniture, nothing like the sterile government offices he'd imagined. Through the partially open door, he could hear his mother's voice, steady but emotional, as she discussed their situation with Ms. Carter. Lily was at a follow-up appointment with Dr. Martinez in another part of the building, accompanied by a nurse who had offered to keep her company, while Sarah and Ethan handled the boring paperwork stuff. The medical assistance program will cover all of Lily's treatments and medications, Ms. Carter was explaining, and the emergency housing. Subsidy should help with your rent for the next 6 months, giving you some breathing room to get caught up on other expenses. I never wanted to ask for help, Sarah admitted, her voice catching. I was raised to believe you handle your own problems, that needing assistance meant you were failing somehow. A lot of people feel that way, Diane replied, her tone free of judgment. But the truth is, these programs exist because we all need help sometimes. They're not handouts, they're investments in families like yours, families that just need a temporary bridge during difficult times. The word bridge reminded Ethan of Sergeant Wilson's new program. In the week since Lily's hospitalization, it seemed like the entire community of Oakridge had mobilized around the idea that no family should have to face a crisis alone, that no child should have to carry the burden Ethan had carried. Ethan's story had somehow become a catalyst. A 10-year-old boy carrying his 6-year-old sister through a rainstorm because there was no other option, no safety net to catch them when they fell. The local newspaper had run an article about it, with Sarah's reluctant permission, and the reporter had focused not on their family's struggles, but on the gaps in community support that had made such an act of desperation necessary. The door opened fully, and Ms. Carter smiled at him. "Ethan, would you like to join us now? We're discussing some programs that might be helpful for you as well." Ethan stood up, straightening his shoulders the way he'd seen his mother do before important meetings. "Yes, ma'am." Inside the office, Sarah sat in a chair across from Ms. Carter's desk, a stack of forms in front of her. She looked tired, but more relaxed than Ethan had seen her in months, as if some of the weight had finally shifted from her shoulders. "Ethan," Ms. Carter began once he'd taken a seat beside his mother, "your mom and I have been talking about some changes that might make things easier for your family. One of those changes involves your role at home." Ethan tensed immediately. Were they going to tell him he couldn't take care of Lily anymore? That he'd done something wrong? Ms. Carter seemed to sense his anxiety. "You've been taking on a lot of responsibility, more than most children your age. And while that shows remarkable maturity and love for your family, it's also important that you have the chance to just be a kid sometimes." "I don't mind helping," Ethan said quickly. "I like taking care of Lily." Sarah reached over and took his hand. "I know you do, honey, and you're amazing with her, but Ms. Carter thinks, and I agree, that maybe you've been carrying too much weight for too long. We've enrolled you in the after-school bridge program," Ms. Carter explained. "It's new, actually, inspired partly by your situation. It provides supervised activities, homework help, and even dinner for kids whose parents work evening shifts. Your mom can pick you and Lily up on a break from the diner around 7:30, which means you'll both be looked after until then. But who will make Lily's dinner and check her homework and make sure she takes her medicine?" The questions spilled out before Ethan could stop them. "The program has qualified staff, including a school nurse who will oversee medication for children who need it," Ms. Carter assured him. "And as part of our new arrangement, your mom will be cutting back to just one job, the assistance programs. We're enrolling in will make that possible." Ethan looked at his mother, hardly daring to believe it. "Really? Just one job?" Sarah nodded, tears shimmering in her eyes. "The diner is giving me a promotion to assistant manager. Better pay, regular hours, and benefits that will kick in after 3 months. I've already given notice at the inn." The news was so unexpected, so completely different from the constant struggle they'd been living with, that Ethan didn't know how to respond. For as long as he could remember, their life had been shaped by scarcity, not enough money, not enough time, not enough help. The idea that things could actually change seemed almost unreal. "There's something else," Ms. Carter continued. "The school has a mentorship program for students with exceptional leadership qualities. Mr. Reynolds recommended you for it. Once a week, you'll meet with a high school student who can help with homework, talk about future goals, maybe even just play basketball or do something fun." "Mr. Reynolds said that about me?" Ethan asked, genuinely surprised. He'd always thought his teacher found him too serious, too adult-like compared to the other kids in his class. "He says you're one of the most responsible students he's ever taught," Ms. Carter confirmed. "But he also thinks you deserve the chance to enjoy being 10 years old. The mentorship program is designed to give you some positive attention that's just for you, not connected to taking care of Lily or helping your mom." For the first time in years, Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. A tightness he hadn't even realized was there, so constant had it become. The possibility of having time that was just for him, of not having to always be vigilant, always responsible, always the backup adult, was both thrilling and terrifying. "What if something happens to Lily while I'm not there?" he asked, voicing his deepest fear. Sarah squeezed his hand. "That's not your job to worry about, sweetheart. It never should have been. Adults will be watching out for Lily. Me, her doctors, the after-school program staff. You just need to be her brother, not her caretaker." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Lily bounced in, followed by the nurse who'd accompanied her to the appointment. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement rather than fever, and the bruise on her arm had faded to a pale yellow, barely visible against her skin. "Ethan, Mom, Dr. Martinez says I'm healing super good." She thrust a piece of paper toward them. "Look, I got a special certificate for being brave during my blood test." The certificate, decorated with colorful stars and a cartoon doctor giving a thumbs up, proclaimed Lily Miller an official bravery champion. It was the kind of silly, wonderful thing that should be part of every child's doctor visit, not a source of fear or financial worry. "That's fantastic, Sprout," Ethan said, genuinely happy to see his sister so animated. The quiet, pain-filled child of a week ago seemed like a distant memory now. "And guess what else?" Lily continued, practically vibrating with excitement. "They said I can go back to school tomorrow. And Dr. Martinez gave me this cool bracelet that tells people about my special blood. So if I get hurt, they'll know what to do." She held up her wrist to display a medical alert bracelet, purple, her favorite color, with her condition and emergency contact information engraved on a metal plate. "It's like my superhero ID," she declared proudly. The nurse who'd accompanied her smiled at Sarah. "Dr. Martinez also gave us all her direct contact information, and she's added Lily to the hospital's pediatric case management program. They'll call every 2 weeks to check in, make sure prescriptions are filled, answer any questions you might have." Another safety net, Ethan thought. Another bridge where there had once been only a chasm. As they left the Family Services Center that afternoon, paperwork completed and appointments scheduled for follow-ups, Ethan felt oddly lighter, not just emotionally but physically, as if he'd been carrying an actual weight that had finally been set down. They stopped for ice cream on the way home, a rare treat that would have been an unthinkable luxury just a week ago. As they sat at a small table outside the shop, Sarah watching her children with a mixture of pride and lingering sadness, a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. Sergeant Wilson stepped out, now in uniform, and approached their table with a warm smile. "Thought that was you," he said. "How's everyone doing today?" "Much better," Sarah replied, gesturing for him to join them. "We just finished at the Family Services Center. Ms. Carter has been incredible." Wilson nodded, pulling up a chair. "Diane's the best. She's been instrumental in getting the bridge program off the ground." He turned to Ethan. "Speaking of which, I was hoping to talk to you about something." Ethan looked up from his ice cream, curious. Me? We're having a community meeting next week to introduce the Bridge program to the public, Wilson explained. The mayor will be there, along with school officials, medical personnel, and social services. We'd like you to say a few words about your experience. Ethan nearly choked on his ice cream. You want me to talk? In front of people? Just for a few minutes, Wilson assured him. Your story is powerful, Ethan. It's already changing how our community thinks about family support and emergency response. Hearing it directly from you would make an even bigger impact. I don't know what to say, Ethan admitted. Just tell them what happened, Wilson suggested. Tell them what it felt like to be in that situation. What would have helped? What you wish had been different. Lily, who had been quietly listening while demolishing her strawberry cone, suddenly piped up. You should do it, Ethan. You're good at explaining things, and you can tell them about how you carried me through the rain like a superhero. A week ago, Ethan would have quickly deflected such attention, uncomfortable with anything that highlighted their family's struggles or his own actions. But something had shifted inside him. Perhaps it was the realization that their story could help other families, could prevent other children from facing the choices he'd faced. Okay, he said finally, I'll do it. Wilson smiled, clearly pleased. Excellent. I'll have Officer Ramirez pick you and your mom up next Thursday evening. The meeting starts at 7 p.m. at the community center. As Wilson left, Sarah studied her son's face. Are you sure about this? You don't have to do it if you're not comfortable. Ethan considered the question. Was he comfortable with public speaking? Definitely not. But was he willing to step outside his comfort zone if it meant other kids might not have to carry their siblings through rainstorms to get help? Absolutely. I'm sure, he said. If it helps other families, it's worth it. The days leading up to the community meeting passed in a blur of new routines. The after-school bridge program turned out to be nothing like the sterile daycare center Ethan had imagined. Housed in the Oakridge Community Center, it offered activities ranging from art and music to science experiments and sports. There was dedicated homework time with tutors available, healthy snacks, and even a quiet room where kids could just read or rest if they needed downtime. For the first time in years, Ethan found himself with hours that didn't revolve around caring for Lily or managing household tasks. He discovered a passion for the chess club, joined a group building model rockets, and even found himself laughing at silly jokes with kids his own age. Lily thrived as well, joining the art corner and proudly bringing home paintings each day. Her medication was handled discreetly by the program nurse. Her special dietary needs were accommodated without fuss, and she made friends who didn't tease her about her bruises or her small size. Sarah, working just one job now, looked years younger. She was home in time for bedtime stories, had energy to cook real meals on her days off, and no longer fell asleep mid-conversation from sheer exhaustion. The night of the community meeting arrived with a mix of autumn rain and crisp wind. Officer Ramirez, as promised, picked them up in her cruiser, Lily excitedly climbing into the back seat as if police escorts were an everyday occurrence. Nervous? Ramirez asked Ethan as they drove toward the community center. A little, he admitted. I've never spoken in front of a lot of people before. Just pretend you're talking to one person, Ramirez suggested. And remember, everyone there already thinks you're pretty amazing. They're on your side. The parking lot of the community center was full, cars spilling onto the side streets. Inside, the large meeting room was packed with people, parents with children, elderly couples, teenagers, professionals in business attire, workers still in uniform from their jobs. Ethan recognized some faces: Mr. Reynolds from school, Dr. Martinez from the hospital, Mrs. Jenkins from their apartment building. At the front of the room, a long table was set up with microphones. The mayor sat at the center, Flanked by Sergeant Wilson, Diane Carter, the school superintendent, and several other officials Ethan didn't recognize. A smaller table to the side had just 2 chairs, presumably for him and his mother. "There are so many people," Sarah whispered, clearly surprised by the turnout. "Word got around," Officer Ramirez explained. "People want to be part of the solution." Sergeant Wilson spotted them and came over immediately. "Thank you for coming," he said, shaking Sarah's hand and giving Ethan a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "We'll have you speak after I introduce the program basics." "Just a few minutes?" "Nothing formal." Ethan nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. Lily squeezed his hand. "You'll do great," she whispered with absolute confidence. The meeting began with introductions and an overview of the current system's limitations. The mayor spoke about budget, constraints, but also about creative solutions and community responsibility. Then Sergeant Wilson took the microphone, explaining the concept behind the bridge program. "Too often, we find gaps in our safety net when it's already too late," he said. "When a child is already in crisis, when a family has already fallen through the cracks. What we're proposing is a community-wide effort to build bridges across those gaps, connecting schools, healthcare providers, emergency services, and social support networks into one cohesive system." He outlined the specifics: a 24/7 hotline that children could call if they couldn't reach their parents during emergencies, a medical information database accessible to first responders, expanded after-school programs like the pilot already running, training for teachers and community members to recognize families in need before crises occurred. "But rather than just telling you about why this matters," Wilson continued, "I'd like to introduce someone who can show you." He gestured toward Ethan. "A week and a half ago, this young man carried his sister 20 blocks through one of the worst storms we've had this year to get her medical attention when all other options failed. His courage is remarkable, but the fact that he had to make that choice is a failure of our entire community." Ethan made his way to the small table at the front, his legs feeling strangely disconnected from his body. Sarah followed, sitting beside him as a steady, grounding presence. A microphone was adjusted to his height, and suddenly hundreds of eyes were on him, waiting. He took a deep breath, remembering Officer Ramirez's advice to pretend he was talking to just one person. In his mind, he focused on an imaginary child, another 10-year-old somewhere in Oakridge who might be carrying burdens too heavy for their young shoulders. "My name is Ethan Miller," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. "A week and a half ago, my sister Lily got really sick. She has a blood condition that makes her bruise easily, and a playground fall that would just be a bump for most kids turned into something serious for her." He described the progression: Lily's fever, his attempts to reach help, the deteriorating situation, and finally, his decision to carry her to the police station when all other options had failed. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice dropping slightly. "Not just that I wouldn't make it, but that I'd make the wrong choice. When you're a kid taking care of another kid, you're always afraid of making the wrong choice, of missing something important that an adult would notice." The room was completely silent now, every adult present seeming to hold their breath. "The worst part wasn't the rain, or how heavy Lily felt after a while, or even how scared I was that she was really sick," Ethan continued. "The worst part was feeling completely alone, like there was no one to call, no one who could help, no bridge between us and the help we needed." "Bandage," he looked up, making eye contact with different faces in the crowd. "I don't think I'm the only kid in Oakridge who feels like that sometimes, who takes care of siblings while parents work, who worries about money or medicine or whether the electricity will stay on, who feels like they have to handle grown-up problems because there's no one else to do it." Several adults in the audience dabbed at their eyes. Others nodded in sad recognition. "The bridge program sounds like it would have made all the difference for us," Ethan said. If I could have called a number and reached an adult who knew about Lily's condition, who could have sent help right away, or even just told me what to do until help arrived. If there had been somewhere safe, we could go after school while Mom was working. If we hadn't lost our insurance and had to stop Lily's medication. He trailed off, overwhelmed for a moment by the weight of all the if-onlys that had defined their lives. Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand, grounding him again. I carried Lily because I love her, and there was no other choice, Ethan concluded. But no kid should have to make that kind of choice. We all need bridges sometimes. Thank you for building them. The silence that followed his final words lasted only a second before the room erupted in applause. Not the polite, measured kind that follows most speeches, but a wave of sound that seemed to contain all the emotion his story had evoked. People were standing, some wiping tears, others nodding emphatically. Diane Carter took the microphone next, outlining the specific resources already available and those planned for the coming months. But Ethan was only half listening. He felt drained, but also strangely empowered, as if speaking his truth aloud had transformed it from a burden into something valuable, something that could create change. After the formal presentations ended, many people approached to speak with him. Parents who thanked him for his bravery, officials who asked his opinion on aspects of the program, other children who looked at him with a mixture of awe and recognition. Mr. Reynolds made his way through the crowd to reach them. That was quite a speech, he told Ethan. You have a gift for making people understand complex situations. I was just telling what happened, Ethan said with a shrug. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do, Mr. Reynolds replied. By the way, I wanted to let you know that your mentor from the school program will be starting next week. His name is Marcus Delgado. He's a junior at the high school, captain of the chess team, and a pretty decent basketball player too. Boom. The mention of chess caught Ethan's attention. I just started learning chess at the after-school program, he said. I'm not very good yet. Well, Marcus is an excellent teacher, Mr. Reynolds assured him, and he's looking forward to meeting you. As the crowd began to disperse, Mayor Jenkins approached their table, hands clasped behind his back in a formal posture that made Ethan sit up straighter automatically. Young man, the mayor said, your story has moved this community in a way I haven't seen in my 15 years in office. I wanted to personally thank you for your courage, both in what you did for your sister and in sharing it with us tonight. Thank you, sir, Ethan replied, uncertain how else to respond to such a statement from such an important figure. The City Council has unanimously approved funding for the bridge program for the next 3 years, the mayor continued, and private donations from local businesses have already committed to matching those funds. Your words tonight will help thousands of children in our community. The enormity of that statement, that his small, desperate act and the words he'd spoken about it could create such far-reaching change, was almost impossible for Ethan to comprehend. He looked at his mother, seeking her reaction. Sarah was smiling through tears. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. So incredibly proud. As they left the community center that night, Lily, now asleep in her mother's arms, despite her earlier insistence that she was definitely not tired at all, Ethan felt a strange sense of completion. The journey that had begun in desperation on a rainy afternoon had somehow led them here, to safety, to support, to a community that now seemed determined to catch children before they fell. Sergeant Wilson walked them to Officer Ramirez's cruiser, his face thoughtful in the glow of the parking lot lights. You know, Ethan, he said quietly, in my 20 years as a police officer, I've seen a lot of people in crisis. Adults often freeze, panic, or look for someone else to solve the problem. You did none of those things. You assessed the situation, made a decision, and acted at 10 years old. Ethan shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what I had to do. Exactly, Wilson nodded. And that's the definition of real courage. Not fearlessness, but doing what needs to be done despite the fear. He opened the car door for them. The bridge program will help make sure other kids have better options than you did. But I hope they face their challenges with the same courage you showed that day. As they drove home through the quiet streets of Oakridge, Ethan watched the familiar landmarks pass by, the park where Lily had fallen, the convenience store where he sometimes bought milk when they ran out, the diner where his mother no longer had to work double shifts, the same town, but somehow different now, filled with people who had heard their story and chosen to act. Officer Ramirez glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Ethan considered the question. "I was just thinking that carrying Lily to the police station was really hard," he said slowly. "But maybe the hardest part was, actually before that, all the times I didn't ask for help because I thought I should be able to handle everything myself." Ramirez nodded. "That's a lesson a lot of adults haven't learned yet," she said. "Asking for help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do." As they pulled up to Pinecrest Apartments, the building looked the same as always, old but dignified, in need of fresh paint and repairs. But something had changed inside its walls. There was a new sense of connection, of safety, of not having to handle everything alone. Sarah carried Lily inside, while Ethan thanked Officer Ramirez for the ride. As he turned to follow his mother into the building, Ramirez called after him. "Hey, Ethan," he turned back. "Yes?" "The department's having a family picnic next month. At Riverside Park. Games, food, that kind of thing. Wilson wanted me to invite you and your family. Think you might come?" The invitation, so casual, so normal, so much a part of regular childhood rather than crisis management, made Ethan smile. "I'd like that," he said. "I'd like that a lot." Later that night, as he lay in bed listening to Lily's soft breathing, from across their shared room, Ethan thought about bridges. Not the physical structures spanning rivers and canyons, but the invisible connections that now linked his family to a wider community of support. The journey hadn't been easy. The 20 blocks through the rainstorm had tested his physical strength in ways he'd never experienced before. But perhaps the greater accomplishment had been finding the courage to allow others in, to accept help, to share his story so that bridges could be built where there had once been only gaps. Somewhere across town, other children were going to sleep without the weight of adult responsibilities pressing down on them. Other families were accessing resources they needed before reaching crisis points. Other bridges were being built, connecting vulnerable people to the help they needed. And Ethan Miller, no longer alone in his vigil, closed his eyes and slept peacefully through the night. 6 months after the night of the storm, Oakridge was transformed not by any grand architectural project or economic windfall, but by something more profound, a renewed sense of community responsibility. The bridge program had expanded beyond its initial scope, touching nearly every aspect of life in the small town. What had begun as a desperate journey through rain-slicked streets had catalyzed a movement that continued to grow, building connections where gaps had once seemed insurmountable. On this particular spring morning, cherry blossoms dotted the trees along the pathway to Oakridge Elementary, their delicate pink petals spiraling down in the gentle breeze. Ethan walked beside his friend Max, their conversation punctuated by laughter as they discussed an upcoming science fair project. Behind them, Lily skipped alongside her best friend Sophie, their matching purple backpacks bouncing in rhythm with their steps. It was a scene of ordinary childhood, remarkable only in how unremarkable it now seemed for the Miller family. Sarah had dropped them at the corner before heading to her management shift at the diner, confident in the knowledge that her children were safely embedded in a web of support that extended far beyond their front door. "So I was thinking we could do our project on renewable energy," Max was saying, gesturing animatedly. My dad has some solar panels we could use for the demonstration. That sounds cool, Ethan replied, genuinely interested. The science fair had once been just another stress point in his overpacked life, another deadline to manage while juggling Lily's care and household responsibilities. Now it was simply an exciting opportunity to explore something interesting with a friend. Mr. Delgado might have some ideas too, Max suggested, referring to Ethan's high school mentor. Didn't you say he's really into environmental engineering? Ethan nodded. Yeah, he's helping me with my application for the STEM summer camp. He thinks I have a good chance of getting a scholarship. The mention of the summer camp would have been unthinkable 6 months ago, a luxury beyond consideration when basic survival consumed all their resources. Now it was a genuine possibility, another door opening onto a future full of potential rather than limitation. As they approached the school gates, Ethan performed his customary scan of the playground, an old habit that hadn't entirely faded. But instead of looking for threats, he now found himself noting the positive changes, the new medical alert system installed at the nurse's station, visible through the front office window, the Bridge Buddies sign-up sheet on the community bulletin board, the parent volunteer wearing a bright yellow vest who greeted children by name as they entered. "See you at lunch?" Max asked as they reached the 4th grade hallway. "Definitely," Ethan confirmed. "Save me a seat." Before heading to his own classroom, Ethan knelt to straighten Lily's slightly crooked headband. "Have a good day, Sprout," he said. "Remember, Mrs. Peterson is picking you up for your doctor's appointment at 11. "I know," Lily said with the exaggerated patience of a 6-year-old who considers herself quite grown up, "and then she's taking me back to her house until after-school program starts, and then you'll meet me there after chess club." "Exactly," Ethan smiled, marveling at how complex their schedule still was, but how it now included a network of adults sharing the responsibilities he had once carried alone. Lily hugged him quickly before darting off with Sophie, their giggles echoing. In the hallway, Ethan watched them go, a flicker of his old protectiveness rising before settling back into its new, more appropriate place. He was still her brother, still vigilant in his love for her, but no longer her primary caretaker. Mr. Reynolds stood at his classroom door, greeting students as they arrived. When Ethan approached, his teacher's face lit up with genuine warmth. "Morning, Ethan. How's the mentorship going with Marcus?" "Really good," Ethan replied. "He's helping me with advanced math concepts that aren't in our regular curriculum." Mr. Reynolds nodded approvingly. "I'm not surprised. Your aptitude tests came back last week, by the way. Dr. Whitman from the Gifted program wants to meet with you and your mother to discuss some additional enrichment opportunities." Another new development, adults recognizing Ethan's academic potential rather than just his responsibility and maturity. Before the Bridge program, his test scores had been good but not exceptional, limited by the constant distraction of worry and physical exhaustion. Now, with proper support systems in place and the freedom to focus on his own development, he was thriving in ways no one had anticipated. "That would be great," Ethan said, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "Mum's off on Thursday afternoons now." "Perfect. I'll set it up." Mr. Reynolds hesitated, then added more quietly, "I saw the news about the state legislature approving funding to expand the Bridge program to other communities. You should be very proud of the role you played in making that happen." Ethan felt a familiar mix of emotions whenever his role was mentioned. Embarrassment at the attention, pride in the positive changes, and a lingering sadness about the circumstances that had made it necessary. "I'm just glad other kids will have help when they need it," he said simply. The morning passed in a pleasant blur of fractions and state history. At lunch, Ethan joined Max and several other friends at their usual table, splitting his sandwich. With Max in exchange for fresh strawberries, not out of necessity now, but as a continuation of their long-standing trading tradition. Their conversation drifted from video games to an upcoming field trip to the Science Museum in the next town over. Normal chatter that required no life or death decisions, no adult-level problem-solving. Just kids being kids, a luxury Ethan was still learning to embrace. After school, chess club met in the library, another new activity that had quickly become Ethan's favorite part of the week. Under the guidance of his mentor Marcus, Ethan had discovered a natural talent for strategic thinking, for seeing multiple moves ahead and anticipating consequences. "Check," Ethan said, moving his bishop diagonally across the board. Marcus studied the position with a raised eyebrow. "Impressive," he acknowledged, but not checkmate quite yet. He shifted his king, forcing Ethan to reconsider his approach. The high school junior had become more than just a chess teacher over the past months. He was a sounding board for ideas, a guide to the complexities of academic advancement, and most importantly, proof that someone from circumstances similar to Ethan's could forge a path to success. "My mom struggled too, you know," Marcus had confided during one of their early sessions. "Single parent, 3 jobs, medical bills after my sister's accident. The difference was, our community stepped up before things got desperate. That's why I wanted to be part of the mentorship program, to help create that same support for someone else." That connection, the understanding that their experiences, while different, shared common threads, had formed the foundation of their growing friendship. As the chess game concluded, with Marcus ultimately claiming victory, but only after Ethan had put up a valiant fight, they packed up the pieces and headed to the after-school bridge program in the adjacent community wing of the building. The program space hummed with activity, younger children engaged in supervised play, older students receiving homework help, a cooking class preparing healthy snacks in the small kitchen area. A wall of photographs documented community events connected to the bridge program, including the initial meeting where Ethan had spoken. His small face looked out from several images, serious but determined, as he addressed a room full of adults. Lily spotted him immediately, abandoning her art project to rush over. "Ethan, look what I made!" She thrust a colorful drawing toward him, depicting what appeared to be their family, standing in front of their apartment building, surrounded by other figures in various uniforms and outfits. "Who are all these people?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious about the crowded scene. "That's us in the middle," Lily explained, pointing to the 3 central figures. "And then that's Dr. Martinez and Sergeant Wilson and Ms. Carter and Mrs. Peterson and Mr. Reynolds." She continued identifying each character, essentially cataloging their support network in crayon and marker. "It's our village," she concluded with satisfaction. "Ms. Ramirez taught us about how some places say it takes a village to raise children, so I drew our village." The simple statement, delivered with a child's straightforward clarity, captured something profound about the transformation in their lives. They were no longer isolated, no longer forced to manage adult-sized problems with child-sized resources. They had a village. Marcus smiled at the artwork. "That's really cool, Lily. Maybe you should add me in there too, since I'm helping your brother become a chess master." Lily considered this seriously before nodding. "I'll draw you next to Ethan, with a crown, because you're the chess king." As Marcus laughed, Ethan felt a familiar presence behind them. Sergeant Wilson, now a regular visitor to the after-school program, stood watching their interaction with evident satisfaction. "Afternoon, chess champions," he greeted them. "Mind if I steal Ethan for a few minutes? There's someone here who'd like to meet him." Curious, Ethan followed Wilson to the program director's office, where a woman in a business suit sat reviewing documents. She stood as they entered, extending her hand first to Wilson and then, with equal respect, to Ethan. "This is Catherine. Delaney from the Governor's Task Force on Community Support Systems, Wilson explained. She's been studying the Bridge program as a potential model for statewide implementation. It's an honor to meet you, Ethan, Ms. Delaney said. Sergeant, Wilson has told me about the role you played in inspiring this program. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, still unused to being credited for something that had felt like his only option at the time. I just did what I had to do, he said, repeating the phrase that had become his standard response to such comments. That's precisely what makes your story so compelling, Ms. Delaney replied. You shouldn't have had to do what you did. No child should. And that's why we want to ensure other communities have systems in place to prevent similar situations. She gestured to the chair across from her, and Ethan sat down, aware that this was not just a casual introduction, but something more formal. The state legislature has approved initial funding for pilot programs in 5 additional communities, she explained. Each program will be tailored to the specific needs of that community, but all will follow the basic framework established here in Oakridge, connecting emergency services, healthcare providers, schools, and social support networks into one cohesive system. Ethan nodded, following her explanation and feeling a surge of pride that the program was expanding, that other children might be spared the choices he had faced. We are putting together a short documentary about the program's development and impact, Ms. Delaney continued. With your mother's permission, of course, we'd like to include your story as the catalyst that started it all. A documentary? Ethan repeated, surprised. Like, on TV? Ms. Delaney smiled. Initially for presentation to the State Education Board and Healthcare Consortium, but yes, potentially for broader distribution later. Your participation would be entirely voluntary, and we'd work around your school schedule. Ethan considered the request. 6 months ago, the idea of having his family's struggles documented on film would have been mortifying. But now, understanding how their experience could help shape policies that might protect other children, the calculation was different. I'd need to talk to my mom, he said finally. And Lily, too. It's her story as much as mine. Of course, Ms. Delaney agreed. We wouldn't proceed without full family consent. Take some time to discuss it, and Sergeant Wilson can let me know your decision. As they left the office, Wilson placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. You don't have to do this if you're not comfortable with it, he assured him. You've already contributed more than enough to this community. Ethan nodded, appreciating the absence of pressure. I think it might be good, though, he said slowly, if it helps other places understand why programs like this are important. Wilson's expression warmed with approval. That's very thoughtful of you. But remember, your first responsibility now is just being a kid, enjoying chess club, hanging, out with friends, focusing on school. Let the adults worry about the big picture stuff. The reminder was gentle but firm, part of the ongoing effort by all the adults in Ethan's life to help him recalibrate his sense of responsibility to a more age-appropriate level. It was a work in progress. Habits formed from necessity weren't easily broken, but Ethan was learning day by day to share the burden he had carried alone for so long. Later that evening, as Sarah prepared dinner in their apartment kitchen, a simple pasta dish, but made with fresh ingredients rather than the budget-stretched meals of the past, Ethan relayed Ms. Delaney's request. A documentary, Sarah echoed, her expression thoughtful as she stirred the sauce, about the Bridge program. About how it started, Ethan clarified. About what happened with Lily. About how things are different now. Sarah set down her spoon and leaned against the counter, studying her son's face. How do you feel about that? About sharing our story that way? Ethan considered the question seriously. I think it's okay now. Before, I was always worried about people finding out how hard things were, thinking you weren't a good mom, or that we might get separated. But now, it feels different. Like maybe our story could be useful. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were the gentle kind that came with healing rather than the desperate ones Ethan had once heard through bathroom doors. "You know what amazes me most?" she said softly. "How wisdom seems to come so naturally to you, even at 10 years old." 11 next month, Ethan corrected with a small smile. 11, Sarah acknowledged. "Almost a teenager. And yet, you've already helped change a whole community." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "If you want to participate in the documentary, I think it's a wonderful idea, but only if you're sure." "I'm sure," Ethan said, surprising himself with how true it felt. "I think it's important." Lily, building a Lego structure at the kitchen table, looked up at the mention of a documentary. "Like a movie? About us?" "Sort of," Ethan explained. "About the bridge program and how it helps families like ours." "Would I be in it too?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with interest. "Only if you want to be," Sarah assured her, "and only talking about things you're comfortable sharing." Lily considered this with the same serious expression she wore when choosing between flavors of ice cream. "I could talk about my special blood," she said finally, "and my cool medical bracelet, and how Ethan carried me to the police station in the rain like a superhero." The casual mention of that night, now transformed in Lily's mind into something almost mythological, no longer sent a chill through Ethan's body. The memory had lost its sharp edges, softened by time and by the knowledge that such desperate measures would never be necessary again. "You could definitely talk about those things," he agreed, "but only if you want to." "I want to," Lily declared firmly. "I want other kids to know about the village, so they don't have to be scared if they get sick." Sarah exchanged a glance with Ethan over Lily's head, a silent acknowledgement of the simple wisdom in her words. "Then we'll tell Ms. Delaney yes," she decided, "as a family." The following Saturday afternoon found them at Riverside Park, where the first truly warm day of spring had drawn out half the town. The annual Spring Festival was in full swing, with booths selling handcrafted items, food stalls offering everything from cotton candy to empanadas, and various community organizations showcasing their services. The bridge program had a central booth, staffed by volunteers wearing blue t-shirts emblazoned with a simple logo, a stylized bridge connecting two hands. A large map displayed the network of schools, healthcare facilities, emergency services and community centers now linked through the program, with color-coded lines showing the various connection pathways. Sarah had volunteered for a 2-hour shift at the booth, having become an unofficial ambassador for the program among other working parents. Ethan and Lily, released from any booth responsibilities, were free to enjoy the festival activities with Sarah's blessing and a few dollars for treats. They had just finished a round on the small Ferris wheel when they spotted a familiar figure approaching, Dr. Martinez, dressed in casual clothes rather than her usual white coat, accompanied by a young girl who appeared to be around Lily's age. "Ethan, Lily!" Dr. Martinez called, waving them over. "I was hoping we'd run into you today. I wanted to introduce you to my daughter, Isabella." The girl beside her smiled shyly, half hiding behind her mother's leg. Lily, never one to respect social hesitation, immediately stepped forward. "I like your shoes," she said, pointing to Isabella's light-up sneakers. "They're sparkly like mine." Isabella emerged slightly from behind her mother. "Thanks, I like your bracelet." "It's my medical alert bracelet," Lily explained proudly, holding out her wrist to display the purple band. "For my special blood, your mom gave it to me." "I know," Isabella said, warming to the conversation. "She told me about how your brother carried you all the way to the police station in the rain. That's like the bravest thing ever." Ethan felt his cheeks warming at the second-hand retelling of his actions, now apparently a story Dr. Martinez shared with her own family. But before he could deflect the praise, Dr. Martinez addressed him directly. "I've been meaning to tell you, Ethan, we've implemented a new pediatric emergency protocol at Mercy General, based partly on what happened with Lily. It's a direct line that children can call if they're caring for a sick family member and can't reach a parent. The call goes straight to a pediatric nurse who can provide immediate advice and dispatch help if needed." The news settled over Ethan like a warm blanket, another safety net being woven, another gap being bridged. "That would have changed everything that night," he said quietly. Dr. Martinez nodded. "Exactly. And that's why we created it. Sometimes it takes seeing a system fail to understand how to fix it." She smiled at both children. "But enough serious talk on such a beautiful day. Isabella has been eyeing the face painting booth all afternoon. Would you like to join us?" The simple invitation, the normal childhood pleasure of having designs painted on their faces at a spring festival, was yet another thread in the new fabric of their lives. As they stood in line at the booth, Isabella chattering with Lily about which designs to choose, Ethan caught sight of other familiar faces throughout the park. Sergeant Wilson was helping grill hot dogs at the police department's community outreach booth. Ms. Carter was supervising a craft activity for younger children. Mr. Reynolds and Marcus were demonstrating chess strategies at a table set up under a large oak tree. Mrs. Peterson was selling homemade jam with proceeds benefiting the Bridge program. All these adults, who had once been strangers or distant authority figures, were now part of their extended community, their village, as Lily had put it. Each one connected to the others through formal programs and informal relationships, creating a web of support that caught children before they fell through the cracks. When Ethan's turn came at the face painting booth, he hesitated, suddenly self-conscious about being too old for such things. But the artist, a local art teacher, seemed to understand his hesitation. "How about something subtle?" she suggested. "Maybe a small design near your temple? I do a nice shooting star that's popular with the older kids." Ethan nodded, settling into the chair. As the cool paint touched his skin, he found himself relaxing into the simple pleasure of the moment. No responsibilities, no worries, just the sensation of the brush and the festival sounds around him. "There," the artist said, holding up a mirror for him to see. "A shooting star for a rising star." The design was indeed subtle, a small, stylized star with a trailing comet tail near his right temple, blending seamlessly with his complexion, while still catching the light when he turned his head. "It's perfect," he said, genuinely pleased. "Thank you." As he stepped away from the booth, Lily rushed up to show off her own face paint, an elaborate butterfly covering most of her face, in shades of purple and blue that matched her medical bracelet. "Do you like it? Isabella got a tiger. Can we get cotton candy now? Mom said it was okay if I asked you first." The rapid-fire questions, the simple childhood desires, the normal Saturday at a community festival, it was all wonderfully, beautifully ordinary in a way that felt extraordinary after their journey. "Sure, Sprout," Ethan agreed, taking her hand. "Cotton candy sounds great." As they made their way through the festival crowds, Ethan found himself noticing details he might once have missed, focused as he had been on potential dangers and responsibilities. The way the sunlight filtered through new spring leaves, the sound of children's laughter mixing with music from a local band setting up on the small stage, the scent of flowers and food, and the peculiar sweetness of early summer in the air. They passed the Bridge program booth, where Sarah was deep in conversation with a young mother holding a toddler on her hip, pointing out resources on a brochure spread before them. She glanced up, caught sight of her children, and offered a quick wave before returning to her explanation. The scene struck Ethan with unexpected force, his mother passing on knowledge of the very systems that had helped their family, extending the bridge to someone else who might need it. The circular nature of community, of giving and receiving, of being helped and helping others in turn. As they joined the line for cotton candy, an announcement came over the festival's PA system. The documentary film crew from the governor's task force will begin filming interviews at the main pavilion in 30 minutes. Anyone who has been scheduled for an interview, please check in with the production coordinator. "That's us later, right?" Lily asked, bouncing on her toes as they inched forward in line. "Yep, at 3 o'clock, Ethan confirmed. "But we have plenty of time first." "I'm going to tell them about our village," Lily declared, "and about how you're the bravest brother ever." Ethan smiled, uncomfortable but no longer embarrassed by her pride in him. "And I'll tell them about how brave you were too. It goes both ways, you know." The cotton candy vendor handed them a large puff of pink spun sugar on a paper cone, and they stepped aside to share it, finding a spot on a bench beneath a flowering tree. As they sat there, sticky-fingered and content, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The 20 blocks through the rainstorm had been just the beginning, the most visible, dramatic part of a much longer path. The real journey had been learning to accept help, to share burdens, to allow their private struggles to become the catalyst for public change. It had been about building bridges not just between emergency services and healthcare providers, but between themselves and their community. Lily's face paint was already smudging as she attacked the cotton candy with characteristic enthusiasm. "You've got butterfly wings on your nose," Ethan told her, handing her a napkin. "That's okay," she said cheerfully. "It still looks pretty." From across the park, Ethan could see the documentary crew setting up equipment near the pavilion. Cameras, lights, microphones arranged to capture the stories that would help spread the bridge program to other communities. His stomach fluttered briefly at the thought of speaking on camera, but the nervousness was tempered by conviction. Their story mattered because it might change the ending for someone else. "Ready to go meet the film people?" he asked as Lily finished the last sticky bits of cotton candy. She nodded, suddenly solemn. "Should I tell them about being scared when I was really sick?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "Only if you want to. You can just talk about the good parts if that's easier." Lily shook her head. "Dr. Martinez says sometimes we have to talk about the scary parts too, so other people know they're not alone if they feel scared." The wisdom in her response, so natural, so unforced, reminded Ethan yet again that his sister was not just a responsibility, but a person in her own right, growing and learning and developing her own understanding of the world. "You're pretty smart. You know that?" he said, ruffling her hair. "I know," she agreed without a trace of false modesty. "Mom says I get it from you." As they walked toward the pavilion, Ethan caught sight of their reflection in a decorative pond. A boy with a shooting star painted on his temple and a girl with butterfly wings spread across her face, hand in hand, heading toward a future that seemed wider and more full of possibility than he could have imagined on that rainy night 6 months ago. The weight of a 6-year-old in his arms through 20 blocks of pouring rain had nearly broken him, but it had also revealed a strength he hadn't known he possessed. Not just the physical endurance to complete that journey, but the courage to ask for help, to accept it when offered, and now to share their story so that others might find their own bridges across the gaps that separated them from safety. They approached the pavilion, where Sergeant Wilson waited to greet them, a script of questions in his hand. "Ready for your close-up?" he asked with a gentle smile. Ethan looked at Lily, at the smudged butterfly wings, and the determined set of her small jaw. She nodded, and he felt her hand squeeze his in silent solidarity. "We're ready," Ethan said, and found that he meant it in ways that extended far beyond this interview, this documentary, this moment. They were ready for whatever came next, secure, in the knowledge that they no longer faced it alone. As the cameras began to roll and the first question was asked, "Can you tell us about the night you carried your sister to the police station?" Ethan took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice clear and steady, carrying their story outward like a bridge, extending towards someone else who might need it, somewhere beyond Oakridge, in another town, with gaps waiting to be filled. "It was raining," he began simply, "and my sister was sick and I didn't know who to call for help." The words flowed easily now, no longer weighted with shame or fear, but rather with purpose, to illuminate the shadows where children still carried adult burdens, to spotlight the places where systems failed, and to celebrate the community that had come together to build something better in the aftermath of one boy's desperate journey through the rain. And somewhere, Ethan knew, another child was listening. Another family was finding their way too. Help, another bridge was being built. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.